My name is Daniel Garza, and my American experience started off here. I grew up picking crops with my family. My parents were immigrants from Mexico with nothing but a 4th grade education. We were so poor. My siblings and I would often miss school to work in the fields. Our home was the size of a tool shed. Had no running water, and what we would do is warm buckets of water on the stove so that when my parents returned from work in the fields, they would bathe with small cups. My father never took welfare because he didn't want to depend on anyone or lose his dignity. He is a proud and noble man.
We can make it with just 3 things. It's God, good credit, and freedom, liberty to work. And that's what the United States is.
You know, I didn't know it at the time, but my father began saving money and buying and selling small properties. He bought a motel with the profit he made. My family and I spent long hours fixing up that motel while still working the fields. My father continued to buy and sell property, and one day he and my mother retired with enough money to live comfortably for the rest of their lives.
If I don't come to the United States, I don't think I have the life that we got right now. Living so good, you know.
My parents' American dream had become a reality. My family and I have succeeded by following the path to freedom. But that path is on the verge of vanishing. What we're starting to see here in America now is a growth in the size and the scope of government that is now starting to look like the governments that we left behind. I'm just torn apart when I see folks who are caught in this dependency that government offers. And not only that, they've condemned their children to a life of mediocrity and subsistence. That this is not the American dream. This is an American nightmare. The LIBRE Initiative is reaching the Hispanic community before they are lost forever. We know advancing economic freedom is the best way to improve human well-being, especially those at the bottom. And that's our message to the world. You know, one day I was speaking before a group of 150 evangelical Hispanic ministers in South Texas, and a man stood up. He had tears in his eyes and said, you know, I've never heard these things before. Why has nobody told us? Most Hispanics have never even heard about economic freedom, but they know it. Cuba, Venezuela, Mexico, Hispanics leave countries that have been ruined by tyranny to come to America, the land of the free. They don't just believe in the cause, they've lived it. It is a privilege to live in the United States because this is a nation where you dictate your destiny. No other nation has fulfilled more dreams and more aspirations than this country. And to have been born here, I'm just grateful to God for that. Learn how you can get involved at joinlibre.org. My parents saw America, I think like a lot of immigrants did before them, as the promised land. And I like to quote a song by Woody Guthrie that he wrote about the Joad family in the novel, The Grapes of Wrath. And he's talking about the family that had come into California, and he said, and they came to the mountaintop, and it looked like the promised land, a rich green valley with a river running through it. There was work for every single hand, they thought. There was work for every single hand. And my parents, when they married, came to America, and they saw America like that. I mean, it really was rich and prosperous. And they knew that they could make, you know, they could improve their lot in life, not only for themselves, but for their children. And they were absolutely right. It was, to quote another author, the best of times and the worst of times, we came as farm workers. And so it was a real hard life. It was the best of times because we were always with family. And I had parents who loved each other. And so we always had that stability in the family. And my parents were, you know, they went as far as the 4th grade because that's all their little rural town in Mexico would allow for. But they were just good, decent people. Christian, you know, ethics, the Protestant work ethic and that whole thing. And I learned so much from my parents. It was the worst of times because, well, being a farm worker, it's hard work and it doesn't pay much. And you're running from, you know, place to place. And we'd migrate from California to Nebraska and Washington State, like the video says, you know, following the crop season. And the treatment that you get is not the best. Sometimes it's actually pretty painful. I remember on one occasion, we were working the fields, the hop fields in the city of Sunnyside, Washington. And Dad had been working there for about a week, and Adam and I, my older brother and I, would often miss school to help out Dad. Times were tough, and that's just the way it was. And so, you know, if you look at my school transcript, it was like a checkerboard. I was just gone a lot because of work. And in this particular occasion, it was during the fall season, and it wasn't, you know, during the hop, you know, vine season, whereas, you know, more in the spring, where you get your beer from. This is when you take out the roots from the ground and you make medicines and different kind of things from. And what it was is that somebody takes a shovel, shoves it into the ground, and then the big chunk of roots that comes out, and you cut those roots into 6-inch little stalks, and then you put it into a bundle of 100. And then, you know, depending on how many bundles you make at the end of the day, well, that's how much you get paid. So it was contract work is what it was called. And I remember during the lunch hour, one of the guys from the crew that had been there longer than Dad had come over to where we were. And the guy said, fíjese, don Adán, le queremos pedir que si por favor le puede pedir un aumento en el salario al patrón. Basically said, you know, don Adán, if you could ask the boss for a raise. Muchachos, he goes, I don't know, you know, I've just started, I don't want to rock the boat, you're asking too much. He goes, well, look, you're the only one who speaks English, you know, we heard you guys, you know, they're having a conversation in Spanish. I don't know. He says, well, no, he's the worst paying, you know, boss in the whole area, and we just feel that, you know, you could convince him if you could give him 5 cents more a bundle. Worked out to about $5 more a day. And Dad, you know, he's just that kind of guy, and he relented. And he says, well, if I don't ask, then, you know, nobody else is going to do it. So Dad said yes, and Dad and Adam and I jumped into the car, and we went over to the boss's house. It was about a half mile away. And I remember Dad got out of the car, and Adam and I got out of the car because it was cold, and we were, you know, standing by the warm hood of the car, and Dad walked over about from here to that speaker where the front door was, and he knocked on the door, and big white man, you know, answers the door, and he says, and he knew Dad. He says, "What can I do for you, Adam?" And Dad said, "Well, you know, call him Mr. Jones." He says, "Well, look, Mr. Jones, you see the crew. Well, they sent me here, you know, in his really broken English." And he says, "Well, they were wondering if you could, you know, see to it if you could give them a 5-cent raise per bundle, because, you know, they're having a tough time paying the bills, and well, you know, you're the boss who pays the least." And he took his little talking points, and I remember Mr. Jones paused for a while, and he took out a checkbook from his back pocket, and he said, "I'll tell you what I'm going to do for you, Adam. I'm going to give those boys a raise." Great, you know, remember thinking, and he says, "But I'm going to make you this check." He says, "You know, I want you to take it and never, you know, step on my property again." And I remember Dad taking the check, and he said, "Well, you know, God bless you, Mr. Carpenter, Mr. Jones." And he walked back to the car, my dad, and didn't say anything. And, you know, he got back in the car, and we drove back to where the crew was, and he says, "You know, muchachos, fíjense que el patrón les va a dar el aumento, and, you know, the boss is going to give you the raise." And he says, "Yay, don Adán," and they patted him on the back, and you know, whatever, shook his hand and things, and he says, "But I got to go." He says, I got another contract that, you know, is waiting for me, and it pays more. And he says, "Well, wait, where are you going?" He says, "No, you know, one of those things." And so we jump in a car, and we, you know, got in the car, and Adam and I were just looking at each other, and we didn't say it, but we knew it. And he says, "Dad just got fired." And we drove away. And frankly, I think instances like that could jade somebody over time when you pile on that many indignities and you know, when you have to see that happen to your father or your family members or whatever. And it could really, I think, lend to folks using it as an excuse, as a crutch later in life, and says, well, the man's got me down, or it's rigged against us, and this whole thing. Or you can do what my father did. You just get back up and you keep doing, because dad had a vision. It's like the folks that were just talking, just so inspiring. You can tell they have a vision. And they start off with, something about them that is so resilient, and something about the human spirit that, it has that kind of, you get knocked down and you get back up and you just go. And nothing's going to stop you from achieving what you set out to do. And my father was like that. And he did. He saved money. He worked hard. I saw him work hard, him and mom. And they borrowed money from their family members, and they leveraged themselves like you can't believe, and risked it on a small business. But it was that business that we were on our way. We were on our way once it paid off, and it was accessing, the free market, the American dream. And I tell you, I look back, about those tough times, and it's those tough times actually that drive me, that motivate me. Because, we're all going to have our challenges. They're going to be different from mine or from my father's or whatever. But, it's like, the folks here at the Georgia Public Policy Foundation were saying, you got to tell your story, because that's what moves people. And people need to identify with you. And sometimes the messenger is just as important as the message. Yeah, he knows what I'm talking about. Yeah, he gets it, that kind of thing. And so, we go out there at the LIBRE Initiative and we tell our stories. There's 4 of these kind of videos, with 4 different personalities, and we speak to young, to the women, we speak to the business owner, and we speak to the faith community. And we talk to them in ways that they understand, in ways that they relate to, about the virtues of the free market. You see, Hispanics have not rejected free market principles. There's just been an absence of the conversation within our community. And until now, we're driving an unprecedented effort, at the size and the scale that we're doing it. We're in 8 states. We're going to be in 10 states by the end of the year. We're just thrilled with the kind of response that we're getting from the Hispanic community, as I knew we would. And so I want to get into the little scripted piece of my remarks, and then I want to talk a little bit about how we're doing that engagement, how we're doing that outreach, because it's so important that we do it here in Georgia. Hispanic community here is growing, and the Hispanic community is what it is. It's not what you want it to be, and so we have to understand, what we have to work with. The famous phrase in our Declaration of Independence is categorically free market, that we are endowed with certain inalienable rights, the right to life, liberty, and that pursuit of happiness that we were just talking about a little bit ago. The pursuit of happiness, that is the founding fathers were in a very true sense declaring, we don't know what does it for you. You figure it out. You figure out what makes you happy. You work hard, you save, risk your capital, make profit, and then pursue your aims, your goals, your aspirations, not those of another, as was eloquently said before me, the speaker. And one need take inventory of our almost innumerable innovations and inventions, unequaled growth and wealth, and technological advances to understand how American individualism, that is, our free enterprise system, has been remarkable in its capacity to expand and advance human possibility. Through the free market, we've discovered that a free human has the God-given ability to create wealth, to control his destiny, and anticipate what life may bring through the sufficiency and the accumulation of capital. That freedom explains why some people, even in difficult economic times, can move up the economic ladder despite assertions that they are among the most vulnerable. Just like waves and waves of poor immigrants did before us, people just like my parents. America was built on waves of poor immigrants who achieved the American dream. But lately, we have turned our backs on the free market system. The current administration argues that only by increasing taxes, expanding the army of federal bureaucrats and spiking government spending, will we see better days? Instead of sticking to the business of redistributing knowledge and opportunity, the government is now redistributing earned wealth from workers to non-workers on a grand scale via massive spending programs. Things like stimulus, bailouts, subsidies, earmarks, cronyism run rampant. At a time when American families are struggling just to make ends meet, only Washington seems to be thriving. At a time of fiscal uncertainty and malaise, government demands more taxes, even though we are earning less. Government seeks to increase the welfare rolls, even though taxpayers are working less. The government increases regulations on business, even though startup businesses have declined. At a time when American taxpayers have had to make sacrifices, politicians say we don't do enough to pay our fair share. And the thing is, when is Washington going to make badly needed sacrifices? And when is it going to look out for the interest of the taxpayer? When will we focus once again on growing economic opportunities in our private sector and return to our free market ways? Methodically and deliberately, government now permeates every aspect of our lives, usurping the role of the market, the family unit, and the church. Convinced that government can remedy every social ill under the sun, this administration has grown the size and the scope of government at levels without historical precedents. With only a meager 2% GDP growth rate and 8% unemployment average to show for it. The worst of it is this: federal spending is ultimately about power that shifts control away from the individual. Every increase in federal spending is an increase in federal power. Every increase in federal spending is a diminishment in individual liberty. Every new federal mandate makes us less free. Every new program and government rule or regulation is, in a very real sense, a politician's desire to modify the behavior of Americans and their way of life, to change culture. Robert Kennedy said, "Government by the consent of the people must be limited in its power to act against its people, so that there is no interference with the right to worship, no restriction for any man to become educated or seek opportunity to gain wealth and fortune. Denial of freedom will be fought against by the American electorate, for freedom is in our blood, it's in our heritage, and it is in our destiny." The power of this statement is boundless, and its intent is clear in its construction. These words express an undeniable and unbreakable truth, that people of liberty, united in the cause of freedom, become the strongest force for improving human well-being and peaceful coexistence. Which is why the United States of America, more than ever before in our history since the founding, needs its people to rally in the defense of liberty, self-reliance, individualism, and our free market system. Once again, we are called to rise up and defend the liberties our founding fathers established, guided by the hand of God, those liberties which past and current generations have died defending in foreign battlefields. But Washington conservatives trying to appeal to Hispanic voters can be frustrating to watch because they're making it harder than it really should be. The frustration stems from the fact that conservatives can and should win this test every time. But time and again, they have failed to make an effective case to the Hispanic community. Having ceded outreach efforts of minority communities to progressive nonprofits, unions, and liberal candidates, their neglect has resulted in the loss of precious votes on a massive scale across the country. The fact that my community, the Hispanic community, has not been engaged at the level that they should be is our fault. The time to drive pro-liberty, free market agenda that makes deep inroads within the Hispanic community is now. And to that end, there are a number of things that the conservatives needs to do, starting now, which is what we're doing. And so I want to talk a little bit about that before I wrap it up. Our message about the principles and the virtues of the free market must be unapologetic. We must stand on those principles, not make them conservative light, or not, try to dismiss them. And it's like I said before, it's not that they reject them, they just don't hear them. They don't. Univision and Telemundo is not telling them about the free markets. Hispanic celebrities are not preaching free market principles. The National Council of La Raza and the League of United Latin America don't have workshops about the free market. We have to do that. Preaching beyond the choir is what we have to do. And we talked about segmentation. And we have to know what audience you're in front of. The fact is, pastors care about religious liberty issues and things like permitting and zoning and licensing and things that impact church growth. Let's talk to them about that. Youth care about inequality, the cost of their tuition. Let's talk to them about those things. And what are the free market alternatives? Women care about workplace advancement, the education of their children. Let's have that conversation, market-based. The business owner cares about regulations and taxes and how he's going to grow his business. Let's have that conversation. Businessman with businessman, conservative to conservative. We gain data on Hispanic electorate and identify and turn them out, the high affinity voters. We're just having a conversation about Texas. Texas, 27 million people, 9.5 million are Hispanic. 20% of the Hispanic population reside in Texas. Only half of them are registered to vote, and only 38% of them turned out to vote. That's why Battleground Texas is going into Texas to try to register them and then turn them out at 62%, which is what they've done in Florida. If they can register more Hispanics and turn them out at a 62% clip like they have in Florida, Texas turns blue, unless we engage. You have to challenge the narrative. They've been told that you don't care, that all you care about is the rich. We have to tell our story. We have over 500 donors that give to us, each one of them self-made. Over 80% of American millionaires are self-made. They had nothing, and it was the free market system that made them prosperous. They need to tell their stories. There are no Hispanic issues. It's not just immigration. It's about the debt. It's about defense. It's about education. It's about transportation issues. It's all of it. If you're somebody who's running for an office, earn their vote, respect them. Talk to them about all the issues that are impacting your community. Go into their churches, the Chamber of Commerces, and the colleges and universities. Have those conversations with them. Do not pander. I don't know how to say this without sounding uncouth. This isn't about white people telling Hispanics we really, really do like you. It's not. This is about conservatives having a conversation with conservatives at that level, the level of respect, as equals, that you want to earn their vote and that you want to listen to what their interests are, what their concerns are. That should be your perspective. Show up, listen, and engage. Jose Malaya, who is my national field director, who was the campaign manager for Marco Rubio in his Senate run, says, they're not going to hurt you. So at the LIBRE Initiative, we're committed to the long-term fight. We are 35 full-time employees. We'll be at 45 by the end of the year. We're in 8 states, like I mentioned. We're in Florida, Virginia, Colorado, Nevada, New Mexico, Arizona, Texas, and California. We'll be in Wisconsin and North Carolina, and hopefully sometime soon in Georgia. And I want to work with every one of you in this room to make sure that we engage with the Hispanic community, that we tell our story, that we drive the principles of the free market, of sound money supply, of limited government, of free enterprise, free trade, risk-taking, individualism, that we celebrate the entrepreneur. Those are the true heroes of our economy. The entrepreneur who risks it all. But let's talk also not only about the job creator, but let's talk about the job holder and how they're impacted. There's 12 job holders to every one job creator. So sometimes as conservatives, we make that mistake that all we talk about is the job creator, the job creator. Well, the middle class is hurting. We need to have that conversation as well. So we're working to make the U.S. Hispanic community a vanguard in the protection of our liberties and our freedoms, and we're having success doing it. And we hope that you will join us in that fight. Thank you so much.